and welcome to this special conversation, Mindfulness in Times of COVID. I'm Surabhi Upadhyay. When unexpected, unknown and undesirable events occur in life, they perhaps present the greatest challenge to us human beings. And that's exactly what the last 1 year has thrown up: chaos of a raging pandemic all around. So as we try and plow forward, how do we keep our mind in balance? How do we look beyond the negativity? How do we find that light at the end of the tunnel? Those are some of the tough questions, and we have a very special guest joining in to give us those answers. He's someone who's been a public speaker for 2 decades, a life guru, a life coach, the urban monk. He goes by all of those titles and many more. Let me welcome on the show today, Mr. Gaur Gopal Das. Sir, thank you very much for taking out the time and joining us on this conversation.
Thank you very much, Surabhi, for having me over on your show. Very grateful to be with you here and have this conversation. Thank you.
You know, I'll straight get down to the point and dive in. Sir, this is a time when a lot of us are in that feeling of being that battle-weary soldier, where there's chaos around. We've seen loss, we've seen destruction, we've seen death. And you don't know how long this is going to go on. We're feeling a little fatigued. We don't have joy. How does one deal with all of this? It's overwhelming.
Yeah, indeed. An overwhelming time. The COVID pandemic has brought to us what it has done. And I think, number one, we need to really be accepting of the fact that we are tired. Sometimes we just try to fight it out a little too much, and we try to be positive beyond a certain limit. And that positivity is, I feel, toxic positivity. To push positivity a little too much beyond a limit can cause toxicity as well. And therefore, I feel it's important to accept that we are going through negative emotions, whether they are frustration, disappointment, depression, loneliness. A lot of mental health issues are on the rise. And I think that's the first step, to be accepting of our current situation. I also feel when we look at mathematical equations, like, for example, if you have an equation for life, you would say life is equal to x plus y. And in that equation, x stands for constants. So very often in our lives as well, there are constants, and we cannot do much about those constants in the current context. It's the pandemic and what the pandemic has done to us. It's kind of a constant from our perspective. We cannot do much to change it, apart from the fact that we can be responsible in terms of our social responsibility. We take care of our health. We practice social distancing when we go out. We wear masks, we use sanitizers, we boost our immunity. This is something that we can do. But apart from that, there's not much we can do to change what's happening outside. When we are talking about keeping our mind calm, when we are talking about, keeping our mind stable, the first thing is to deal with those constants. And there's three things we need to do. Number one, identify those constants, things that we can't change. Number two is to accept them as quickly as is possible, so that we have our energy, our time, our mental space, our resources reserved for changing what we can. And third, not to hover over it constantly. Those anxieties, those worries, those negativities, the more we hover over it, they increase. Let's identify what we can't change. Let's accept them so that we don't spend our energy and our mental space on them. And we do not hover on them, do not dwell on them, because then that starts hurting us a lot. Now, in that equation, the second component is the why, which is the variables. And variables are things that we can change. We find hope, we find positivity, we find a ray of light when we start looking at what we can change, what we can do, than when we look at what we can't. Right? So when we talk about the variables, I feel there are 2 or 3 things we should look at. Number one is we should never give up hope. Hope is that one thing that keeps us going through the darkest moments of life. And we've all seen in our own personal lives, or as individuals, as humanity, as organizations, as a nation, globally as a humanity, we've all seen that hope is what brings us back from those dark times. Hope is what helps us bounce back to
Right.
normalcy. Times are indeed tough, but if we lose hope, everything's lost, right? So at the end of a dark night, there is the sun that rises. But the sun doesn't rise based on our calling for it. The sun rises in its own time. And when we're talking about, we're not talking about just some sentiment or just some emotion. It's not just like an emotional hook that we should be hopeful.
Right.
I think even if we look at statistics, if we look at data, we will see that you could look at your own life as individuals and see that your track record of coming out of challenges has been great, actually. Right. If we look at our history as individuals, we'll find that there
Right.
have been challenges, there have been troubles, and we've come out of it. It may have taken a while, it may have been hard, it may have been dark at that time, but we won over it. If you look at organizations and companies,
Sure.
corporate organizations, we will see that there may have been financial recessions, there may have been difficulties in those organizations. We came out. As a country, we have, as a
Right.
humanity, we have. So in the past, we have seen that if we look at statistics and data, we have come out of the difficult times that we've been
Sure.
through. And this won't be an exception as well.
I just wanted to come in over there and ask you, and I have a further question on positivity and how to get to that hope. But just even before that, I think the challenge that a lot of people are right now facing is first cutting down the negativity. Sure, you cannot look at certain negative data points or certain negative piece of news if you choose to do so.
Correct.
But there is an overall feeling of life in limbo. Things are
Yes.
stalled. Someone's job opportunity was missed. Someone's marriage got stalled. The special ceremony got stalled. Someone's move to a different city perhaps got stalled. So you are in this limbo, which is why it seems to be getting more frustrating. So how does one deal with that and then cross over to the light, the side of hope that you speak of?
So I feel that going through these negative emotions is absolutely normal. I don't think we need to resist that feeling. I don't think we need to resist that pain. It is normal to go through this. At the same time, to remain in that state of negativity may not be the best thing to do because it jeopardizes the experience of our peace, the experiences of our joy, and it also jeopardizes our normal functioning and what we do in our lives, whether it's work or study for students, whatever we may be doing. So to get affected is normal, I feel, and I don't think we need to feel any guilt. I don't think we need to resist it. I think it's fine to go through those negative emotions, but I also feel it's important that we learn how to come out of it. I was saying to somebody the other day that going through our real emotions and going through our pain is a part of healing as well, right? Like if we remember any time our bodies were physically hurt, of where we had a wound, there was pain, and as the wound heals, the pain continues until a point that the wound heals. Now that pain that we go through is a part of healing as well. So to resist that pain artificially and to pump oneself with that artificial positivity, what I call as toxic positivity, is to stop the process of healing. To go through those emotions, whether it's frustration or disappointment or bereavement, is a normal thing for all of us. And that going through those emotional upheavals is a part of healing as well. The mind, I don't think the mind can be negative all the time. The mind gets tired of negativity as well. The mind gets tired of negativity is the time when we say, okay, let me look for something positive, right? Now, in which case, it's important for us then at that point to look at the other positive aspects in our life as well. Like I often say, if somebody has lost a job, to tell him or her that be grateful that you have a roof over your head. Be grateful that you have food on your plate. Be grateful that you have a wonderful family. Well, I am grateful for those things. But just being grateful for those things
Yes.
doesn't do away with the pain that I'm going through if I've lost my job. You know what I mean? So
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
they're two different emotions. So I need to deal with this, the pain that I'm going through, and one way to deal with is to go through it. But while I go through that pain, then on
Mm-hmm.
the other side, I have the other aspects of my
Mm.
life where those smaller moments which I can celebrate,
Mm-hmm.
those smaller good things that I can look at
Mm-hmm.
and be grateful for those as well. But to say that
Mm-hmm.
gratitude will nullify this pain, I'm
Sure.
not sure. I'm not too sure. Gratitude will probably brace me to deal
Okay.
with that pain
Okay.
better, but gratitude won't nullify that pain. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We've discussed the concept of pain, accepting it, dealing with it, and I really want to talk about control now, sir, because a lot of us people, the urban youth, everybody wants to be in control of their lives, what we're going to do next, where we'll travel next, what's our career trajectory, and a lot of those plans have been completely thrown out of the window. So
Correct.
how do we pull ourselves together and regain control of our mind to begin with before we control our life?
Yes, yes. I think, like I always say, it's not so much about what happens to us, it's about how we respond to what happens to us, and it's how we deal with what happens to us. We have very limited, often, we have very limited control over the circumstances around us, but we have unlimited control over the way we respond to the circumstances internally. So there's the outside world and the outside circumstances, and there is the inside world where we have our inner responses to the circumstances. So when the circumstances are not in our control, it is very, very crucial and very, very important that we start looking at how we respond to it. Now, we can react to it or we can respond to it. And when we react to it, that reaction to it is what causes a lot of negativity and frustration. But if we respond to it, we can experience a certain sense of control within, although we do not have a sense of control without externally over those circumstances. So it is very important that we take charge of responding to those situations in the right way or in the proper way. Now, the fact of the matter is this, that yes, I know that I need to respond. Yes, I know that I need to take charge of how I feel. Yes, I know that I don't have control over the external circumstances, but I have control over my inner self or my inner response. But the fact is that I'm unable to do it. I feel weak. I feel paralyzed. I feel a lack of ability to deal with that inner response. In such a scenario, when we feel weak, I think we need to borrow that strength. And like for example, if I were to lift something up, and if I see that I'm unable to lift it, I need to borrow that strength with two other guys who can help me lift that weight up. So similarly, in this current situation as well, when we
Mm-hmm.
find ourselves helpless in responding rightly, or in lifting up this mental weight that is weighing us down, I feel we must borrow that strength. That strength can be borrowed from
So
uh,
friends and family.
yes, it can be borrowed from friends and family in the form of emotional support. It can be borrowed from guides and mentors in the form of wise words. It can be borrowed from inspirational or motivational content that we can consume by reading books or watching content online, which can lift our spirits up and help us respond rightly. We can borrow that
Mm-hmm.
strength from spiritual practices like meditation or mindfulness. So, whatever may be the means of gaining that ability to respond, that may vary from individual to individual.
Life is all about celebrating something,
Yes.
celebrating someone's, anniversary or a birthday or something positive in life, a promotion, a party, get-togethers, and a lot of that has been, completely done away with. Even let's say if places of worship were to offer that sense of peace to some people, even that's not available anymore. So go digital, is it? Even to borrow the strength, get your mind on track.
Indeed, once again, we are with the constant and the variable. The constant being that we are not going to be able to go to attend a party or be with our family. We are not going to be able to go to a place of worship or a center of meditation. We are not going to be able to do that. So, I think, as you rightly said, Surabhi, we need to look at creating online communities of how, at least at this time, where we can connect to each other on whatever front, whether it's our emotional support, so we connect on that front with friends and families. If it comes to spiritual support, we connect to that community where we can get that uh, get that help in terms of meditation and mindfulness. If it comes to guidance, we probably, like I
Mm-hmm.
said earlier, we can consume online content, or we connect to others who are wise and trustworthy, from whom we can get that help. So yes, digital connection is what we are left
Mm-hmm.
with at this point in time. But I also feel this is
Mm-hmm.
also the time for coming back to that earlier point that we were talking about. We take charge of our own life in our own hands as well. Right? Dependence is good,
Mm-hmm.
but simultaneously we also need to learn to be independently in charge of our own lives. So yes, like I said earlier, we need help, and we are going to take that help, but we can also look at this situation as an opportunity to slowly start taking charge of our own lives in a way that the pandemic is
Mm-hmm.
here, it will pass away. Everything passes away in time, right? But there will
Mm-hmm.
be similar challenges
Mm-hmm.
that will come to each of us in the future as well, right? So yes, taking help is
Mm-hmm.
important, but taking charge of our own lives is important as well. Like I often give the analogy of a guy who is being driven in a car, right? Now, if he has a chauffeur or
Mm-hmm.
she has a chauffeur, and he or she is sitting in the back seat, that person can get very distracted by what's happening. Right? The person can look around at the
Mm-hmm.
billboards in the city. The person can uh, browse the internet on the smartphone. The person can be chatting with someone, going to sleep, eating, doing whatever. But the driver cannot get distracted.
Mm-hmm.
If the driver gets distracted, there's an accident.
Right.
Right? Now, as long as we keep
Yes.
sitting in the passenger seat, we will remain perennially distracted and affected. So it's important that we
Mm-hmm.
also start
Mm-hmm.
getting into the driver's seat, which means to take charge. Right? So at this time, I think
Got it. Yes.
digital connection is very important, and we take help, whatever
Mm-hmm.
help that may be, but also look at this as an opportunity to slowly start taking charge of our own
To take
life.
charge.
Yes. So if in case I
Okay.
don't have anybody around me, will I continue to wallow in self pity and
Mm-hmm.
negativity, or can I also start taking responsibility to help myself? So I think it's a combination of both.
Yes.
Both
Yes.
there, hand in hand.
Understood, understood. Never back down, as they say. This is the time to stand tall as well and get that strength from deep within us. Okay, now let me talk about, the business community, and that's a big part of the CNBC TV 18 community as well. Whether it's business owners or CEOs or big bosses of companies, I think an additional issue that they're grappling with is the balance between employee welfare and empathy in these challenging times, and business objectives. I mean, at the end of the day, there's a business to be run. There are shareholders and profits also that you can't totally ignore. Would you like to give any sort of words, tips, advice on how to maintain this balance?
When we're talking about businesses and business houses, ultimately it's the employees, it's the human potential that's responsible for executing any strategy that we make. So, as much as strategy is extremely important in these times, I feel the morale of the people who execute that strategy is more important. You know, if the morale is low, people are not giving their very best to execute the strategy to come out of the abyss that we are in. Uh, I remember this very, very popular case study. Simon Sinek used to quote that a lot, uh, of a company in the Midwest of America during the recession in the year 2008. Uh, this company called Barry Waymill Limited lost their standing orders uh, just overnight. 30% of their standing orders they lost overnight because of the recession. And they were a middle-sized manufacturing company, and 30% standing orders lost meant a loss of $10 million. Now, the then CEO, Bob Chapman, called the board meeting and asked all the leaders what would be the way out to recover those $10 million losses. Uh, the obvious answer was layoffs. The obvious answer was to chuck people out, not because they wanted to, but they didn't have a choice. They couldn't afford to keep that manpower. So Bob Chapman raised an important question. He said, if you weren't doing financially well personally, would you lay off your spouse? Would you lay off your parents? Would you lay off your children? And the obvious answer was no, because they are family. And Bob Chapman got back to the board and said, everybody around here is family. They've been there with us all through. If they've been there us through our good times, we should be there for them during these bad times as well. So Bob Chapman called for a meeting of everybody in the company. And when everybody came there, he came up to the podium and he said, the first thing I want to say is we are not laying anybody off. And the first thing that happened was the morale shot up. And then he said, isn't it worthwhile that all of us put together suffer a little bit than some of you suffer more by being laid off? And then he came up with a program which later came to be known as the furlough program. He said, everybody from the CEO to the rank and file employee, everybody goes on an unpaid leave of 8 weeks. And based on the respective salaries, we would recover all our losses. And you don't have to go on a leave all at once. You could take the leave any time through the year, but you won't be paid for those 8 weeks. Now, everybody preferred that. It's just 8 weeks of no salary, but then we get money for the rest of the year, and together we will recover the losses as well. The morale went because there was empathy and care, and people who were in high-ranking positions started trading with people who were in low-ranking positions. You may not be able to afford 8 weeks, but I can. And so they took 2 weeks from the 8 weeks, and they went on a 10 weeks holiday, and the other guy went on a 6 weeks holiday. Relationships deepened, the morale went high, and that year where everybody was financially struggling, Barry Way Miller made $20 million. They made $10 million of profit that year because the human potential fitted to the strategy. So I feel it's very crucial and important that empathy needs to be there, because with that empathy, strategy coupled with that will definitely work well.
Wow, that's a wonderful and very inspiring story indeed. You know, we're down to the last 1 minute to 30 seconds of this conversation. So I'll ask you personally, where do you derive joy from? What is your source of strength? What's the final message you'd like to leave us with?
Sure. My strength comes from my spiritual practice, meditation. My strength comes from my very close friends whom I connect to. My strength comes from doing what I love to do and following my passion. My strength comes from reading meaningful books, whether they're spiritual or whether they are inspirational leadership books. So I think it comes from support of friends. It comes from spiritual support. For my intellect, it comes from reading, good books. And definitely it comes from doing what I love to do and following my passion. So that's the source of my strength.
Got that. Thank you for this very, very important and inspiring conversation. I think personally for me, the best message is get into the driver's seat of your life. There is no other way to deal with this. Thank you very much, Gaur Gopal Das, for taking out the time and being with us for this conversation.